I've got this GL450 up on the lift and I'm chasing a front end noise. This is something that a lot of people have to deal with when these cars get up over 100,000 miles. You're going to end up hearing noises, whether it's a little ticking, clunking, or whining or growling. This is kind of a growl noise that shows up at about 40 miles an hour. And you think, oh, maybe it's the axle. You know, something's wrong with that. You have to be careful. If you just start guessing, then you're going to replace some part and it's going to not fix the problem. There are three things you have to look at when you're hearing these front end noises that have to do with rotation speed. I'm not talking about just clunking and other noises going over rough ground. We're talking about rotation speed. The noise will change as you increase or decrease speed. You've got a bearing that's up in the front differential right up here that could be going bad. You have axle spider joints that could be going bad or worn out. And you also have the hub bearing right here that could be going bad. So how am I going to figure out which one it is? Well, you got to pull the axle and then you got to start doing some diagnosis. With the rust on this axle shaft, this is not OE Mercedes. So this has been replaced. So do you just assume that it's probably okay because it's been replaced sometime during the life of this car? What I do is I check these spider joints by holding in tight here like this, hold the shaft, and then I'm going to see if I can get it to rotate. Look at that, it's moving. Maybe only a little less than a 1/16 of an inch, but I have movement right there. Let's check the other end. Well, look at that, I've got a little bit of movement here too. So this is probably typical of these cheap under $100 axles that you can buy, aftermarket ones. I don't think they last very long, but I'm not sure that just that little play would cause the growling or humming noise I'm hearing, particularly between 35 and 50 miles an hour. Usually, if these axles are worn, they'll make a clicking sound when you're turning really hard to the right or to the left, or they'll make a clunking sound when this gets severely worn. Now, this little bit of play here is not that critical, but what I want to do is rotate this like this and move it back and forth when I'm all the way to one side and the other. And that joint actually feels pretty good. And I'll check this joint here. Okay, those feel pretty good. I don't think the axle is a problem. So next, I got my fingers up in there on those roller bearings, and I'm kind of feeling that back and forth. And that feels tight and fairly smooth, so I'm not going to worry about that one right now. So the only thing that's left is this front hub bearing. And the only way you can really check this is you have to remove the axle. You can't, spin the tire with the axle in place. That could give you some false readings. But look, I'm spinning this like this, and it feels fine. And of course, if they're real bad, you're going to have play. You can get a hold of the brake drum and just rock it back and forth. But there is no movement here. And when I turn it this way, it feels pretty good. So does that mean that bearing's okay? This is what these bearings look like on these 4MATICs. And you'd look at the size of that bearing and you say, there's probably no way that could wear out. But I've discovered a new way to test these. So do any of you recognize this? If you've been around RC model flying, you'll know exactly what this is. This actually helps start some of the big models that I have that have big gas engines in them. You need the torque, low speed, that's why there's this gear reduction. But I decided to stick this on the hub and see if I could get this spinning fast enough so I could listen and hear whether there's any excessive wear inside that big bearing. Listen to that. That's exactly the sound that I'm hearing at 40 miles an hour. So just because the bearing's tight, doesn't have any play, doesn't really mean it's good. So how do you replace this bearing anyway? I guess you have three options. You could take it into a shop and have them do it. It's going to be quite expensive. You can do it yourself. Two different ways you can do it. If you look at the factory service manual, it tells you you're going to have to take this whole steering knuckle off and take it over to a press, hydraulic press, and press out both the hub, and then you can press out the bearing. Now, I've already got the hub off, and I got this off without using a press. And I probably got a little ahead of myself because I didn't film it, but in a future video, I'll show you how I got this part off. Now, there's the bearing in there. So I'm looking at this thinking, well, maybe I should just take this all off and take it into Les Schwab. They've got the big press and the tools to get this old bearing out and the new bearing in. Remember, the bearing has to be interference pressed in to the knuckle, and then the hub has to be interference pressed in to the inner part of the bearing. There's no hammering here. There's no pushing. It takes a ton of force, literally. So if you go on YouTube, you'll say, wow, I see all these videos where people are pulling out these bearings without even taking the knuckle off the car. There's a couple of advantages. You save a lot of time. You don't mess up your alignment. And if you look at some of these videos, you say, well, I've got my GL bearings are bad. I'm gonna get one of those cool pullers. You know, they're only like $70, $80. So why not? Why not spend $70, $80 and do this myself? Well, let me show you the problem you're going to run into. So remember now, we're talking specifically about the GL450 and the GL550 up to 2012. So you get all excited. You watch some videos on YouTube and say, wow, there's all kinds of videos showing how to pull those bearings out using a special puller. You go onto Amazon, you see there's some for $50, there's some for $60, there's some for $70. So you don't buy the cheapest one. And it gets here and you go, oh boy, look, I've got all kinds of, you know, there's the bolt to press it through. This is called a sleeve puller, and I'll show you why they use the word sleeve. So you have different sizes for different size bearings to be able to pull the old bearing out of the hub, and then you're going to actually use the bolt and the nut, and you're going to pull the new bearing back in. So you get your bearing out, you're looking at this big bearing for these GLs, and you have to have a sleeve that you can pull this into as you pull it out of the knuckle. And, oh, look, I've got 4 different sizes, and you go to look at this. The biggest size in all of these cheaper sleeve pullers is about 4 inches, and you go, uh-oh, this isn't going to work. There isn't anything in here big enough for the GL bearing. Oh, no. So you think, oh, man, you can order one that's big enough, but it gets really expensive. And then you start thinking, well, maybe I should take the knuckle off and take it into Les Schwab. So I'm sitting here looking at this today, out at the shop on a Saturday, and I'm thinking, oh boy, look, opportunity for a new tool. Stay tuned for part 2.